Graham Hancock claims that an ancient civilization was wiped out by a massive comet 22,000 years ago. Graham Hancock is a popular name on the list of archaeologists and researchers who dared to look at ancient history with a different view. He became the loudest voice in the argument against the accepted chronology of the development of human civilization. He presented evidence of how a massive celestial object completely wiped out a human civilization much older than known settlements. Graham Hancock proposed many alternative theories that might not please mainstream archaeologists. For example, he said that some ancient structures, such as the Great Sphinx of Egypt, were actually remnants of a much older stage of human civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. He based his theory on the correlation between cultural and geological events between different sites as distant as Indonesia, Turkey, Egypt, and India. These indicate that a human civilization lived much earlier than it is claimed by scientists. He also is, of course, the writer of The Magicians of the Gods, having to do with the pyramids. Now, in other words, he says, mankind had developed advanced civilizations long before the emergence of the Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations that mainstream archaeology believes were the very beginning of human civilization. In fact, Hancock proposes that ancient civilizations such as Egyptians, Mayans, and Mesopotamians had only inherited the knowledge of a much more advanced civilization that predated them by possibly 6,000 years or even more, and which was destroyed by a great cataclysm. The same cataclysm that brought the last ice age to a dramatic end around 12,000 BC. We're talking about the Younger Dryas comet impact that put an end to the mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and the Clovis culture of America, for example. Magicians of the Gods. In his book, Magicians of the Gods, Graham Hancock mentioned traveling to different parts of the world, gathering evidence for the lost ancestor civilization, which he argues disappeared during the cataclysm upheaval at the end of the last ice age. We're talking about the Younger Dryas comet impact. And due to the run-in with the broken shards of a massive comet. He suggests that this comet travels with the famous torrid meteor shower that comes in late June, so we should be seeing that in a few days, to early July, and again in late October to early November. He argued that this particular meteor shower is filled with massive remnants of a massive comet that broke up for some unknown reason roughly 20,000 years ago, the shards of which, some as large as 2 kilometers in diameter, collided with the North American and European ice sheets and brought about the apocalyptic Younger Dryas around 12,900 years ago to 11,700 years ago, BC, the phase of the Ice Age. Graham Hancock is a popular name on the list of archaeologists and researchers who dared to look at history in a different way. So he became the loudest voice in the argument against the accepted chronology of the development of human civilization. He presented evidence of how a massive celestial object completely wiped out the human civilization, which was much older than settlements known. He proposed many alternative theories that might not please mainstream archaeologists. For example, he said that some ancient structures, such as the Great Sphinx, were actually remnants of a much older stage of human civilization that were actually older and existed before the end of the last ice age. And his theory is correlated between the cultural and geological events between different sites as distant as, we said, Indonesia, Turkey, Egypt, and India. So in other words, mankind has developed advanced civilizations long before the emergence of Egypt and Mesopotamia that mainstream archaeology believes were the very first beginnings of human civilization. In fact, Hancock proposes the ancient civilizations such as the Egyptian, Mayans, and Mesopotamians only inherited this knowledge from older civilizations. And he argued that this particular meteor shower is filled with massive remnants of a massive comet broken up from some unknown reasoned roughly 20,000 years ago, and its shards, as large as 2 kilometers in diameter, collided with North American and European ice sheets and brought about the apocalyptic Younger Dryas era, an ice age, about 13,000 years ago. Hancock wrote, "The impacts from comet fragments a mile wide, approaching at more than 60,000 miles an hour, generated huge amounts of heat which instantly liquidized millions of square kilometers of ice, destabilizing the Earth's crust and causing the global deluge that is remembered in myths all around the world." And a second series of impacts equally devastating, causing further cataclysmic flooding around 11,600 years ago, the exact date that Plato gives for the destruction and submergence of the continent of Atlantis. The evidence revealed in this book shows beyond reasonable doubt that an advanced civilization that flourished during the Ice Age was destroyed in the global cataclysm between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. And as per Hancock, this sudden reemergence of cold was due to a comet that impacted the polar caps, triggering colossal tides and covering the atmosphere with dust for more than 1,000 years. So you can imagine it was like a volcanic winter. The researcher collaborated in different explorations, visiting locations such as mysterious sacred sites of Gunung Padang in Indonesia. There he found the remains of columnar basalt that, according to him, belonged to a pyramid dating from the year 22,000 BC or even earlier. And according to him, those who survived, known to ancient cultures as the sages, the magicians, the shining ones, and the mystery teachers of heaven, the cataclysms traveled the world in their ships to keep the signs of the dying civilization. They settled at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Baalbek in Lebanon, Giza in Egypt, ancient Sumer, Mexico, Peru, and even Indonesia. And according to experts, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is more than 9,600 years old and is the greatest evidence of the effects of a devastating scenario. And according to Hancock, the area served for the survivors of the cataclysm to preserve at least some knowledge of the civilization that was annihilated with the intention of transmitting it to new generations. The researchers say that it is no coincidence that the first traces of the re-emergence of civilization in the form of the oldest known megalithic architecture, in addition to agricultural knowledge, occurred in Göbekli Tepe 11,000 years ago. This date coincides perfectly with the Younger Dryas and the return of a more pleasant global environment. Magicians of the Gods, the book, also presents evidence that fragments of the comet reached ancient Egypt as well. Actually, this comet, fragments have been found all over the place, all over the world. Now, there in an ancient cult in Heliopolis developed a way to preserve historical knowledge for the benefit of new generations in the form of astronomical schematics and monumental architecture. Will the comet arrive again? Well, according to Hancock, yes, and we're not far from that date. In 2015, Mr. Hancock claimed in his article published in the Daily Mail that an Earth-destroying comet was headed to Earth in 20 years, so that would make it 2035, which is 11 years from now. He wrote, "These magicians left a message for us, not a metaphorical spiritual message, but a direct and urgent warning. What happened before can happen again. What destroyed their world can destroy ours." He warned that the impact of the comet would be 1,000 times worse than the detonation of every single nuclear weapon on the planet, a collision with the remnants of a comet big enough to end all life as we know it on our Earth. And this is on Deshin News Post. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.